Welcome to the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of The Rewind. A big thank you to everyone who is here listening live to our debut on YouTube, or just to those of you that have downloaded the show on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support every week and the discussions around the show is honestly what keeps me going and makes Rewind my favorite part of the week. As always, I'm joined by my right-hand man here, Therek. What's going on, my dude? Anything fun to report?
Well, my oldest kid got his driver's license this week. So I realized, first of all, how old I am. And on the bright side, though, I'm no longer the dad taxi. So things are looking up.
Yeah, that should give you a little more like reliable gaming time when you don't have to go pick up or drop off.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to worry all the time, but, small price to pay, I guess.
You know what? You're only worrying because it's the first time. You'll get over that soon, and it'll just be like, "Hey, go pick up this for your mom."
Totally, absolutely. I'll just be sending him on errands like nobody's business,
without a doubt. Well, let's go ahead and jump into this and get started on this week's Rewind. This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. So as we always do, let's go ahead and start with VR, and not a lot of news outside of Twitter. So we're just going to jump right into their Twitter categories here. They had two. And talk into those a little bit. So the first one here was, do you enjoy game soundtracks? And if so, would you be interested in one for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen? So we're going to start with a very familiar face here who jumped right. Therek, you jumped right on this topic.
I did. I was so happy to see this question. I love this question. I'm glad they asked a good one. Some of the ones I'm not always into and I don't always reply, but this one definitely am. I'm a huge fan of game soundtracks. Music is really an essential part of the experience for me. And when I want to relive an experience I had playing an old game, I'll go back and I'll listen to the game soundtrack. And I don't even need to play it. I just listen to the soundtrack and it brings me right back. So I would definitely be interested in a soundtrack for Pantheon. Like I've got an iPhone at my office, like an old iPhone 4 connected to a speaker dock, and I've got nothing on it but game soundtracks. So I listen to everything like old Sierra game music. I've got the Vanguard soundtrack on there. So you name it, I've probably heard it. And it's a really, really big, important part of the experience for me.
I have the unopened Vanguard Collector's Edition that I found online, and I think I got it for $20.
I remember when you bought that. I encouraged you to buy that.
Yeah, and I haven't opened it. I still didn't. I don't think I can open it. I don't know.
I think you should, but I'll leave that to you.
Well, I'll get to my opinion on this in a second, but as we always do, let's go ahead and run through Twitter here and give some of the responses from the community, some familiar names and some new names in there. And of course, one of the most familiar, we'll start with Basgrim, who actually did something really cool. He actually linked the SoundClouds for Pantheon MMO, which, if I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know this existed. I don't know how this kind of slipped by me. And I actually spent a lot of time this week, like listening through it, and looking through the titles, and I even played around a little bit with Fading Memory, and made like a looping track of it to put it the background music for some of the Pantheon.Plus and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun listening to these, and now I kind of want a little bit more. But again, we'll get to my opinion here at the end. JJ Padaria said, I enjoy game soundtracks very much. The music I've heard in Pantheon so far has been amazing, and I would most definitely buy an official soundtrack and listen to it. Zerjerk said, only game soundtracks I have liked were Quake 1 and Quake 2, Deus Ex, and System Shock. Quake 1 and Quake 2 were like 9 Inch Nails, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like, it was really heavy industrial kind of music. And same thing, it makes me think of the Doom soundtrack. Classic, right? 90s DOS music with the old Sound Blaster music. Really good stuff.
Yeah, I don't know about Quake 2, but I know Quake 1 was Trent Reznor, the whole soundtrack.
Yes.
And that's why when you got nail gun ammo, it said NIN on it. If you remember
that's right, exactly.
He did say, though, he normally he has his in-game music off and has his own music playing. Alicera said, yes, I love game music. Dayhawk said, maybe for a stream or listening via other means, but not during gaming. With voice chat, music tends to conflict being able to hear others. Also, for me, music playing in the middle of nowhere or combat breaks immersion for me. I tend to turn music off in games. That's my trigger word. I think we've determined that.
Yeah, one of the few, or one of the many, I should say.
Yeah. Juwan said, soundtracks are one of, if not the most important things for me in any game. It's one of those things like animations that you just kind of have to get right or else it can kill your game, in his opinion, he says. So yes, he'd be very interested in a soundtrack for Pantheon. Kendi64 says, I prefer to have my music on while playing, except when raiding. I may have the music lower than the game sounds, but something seems like kind of off if I don't hear at least some of it. He says, I like how music for each area or special encounter makes it feel a bit more distinct.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was just thinking that too. And, in certain zones, like if think about a certain zone has one piece of music and another has a different piece of music, it really gives personality to those areas, right?
Yeah, for sure. So Nocturnal Demise also said, for a long time, I haven't really gotten into a soundtrack. Most of my friends would call out a song from a game and it just awes me. I just never really been into it. So that said, lately I've been putting some original soundtrack music into his D&D sessions, and it's just been an amazing addition to the game. That's pretty neat. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think there's actually a few companies out there that do that, specialize in just making sort of music for D&D sessions, which is pretty cool.
You know what's funny? I actually stumbled upon that, like a random company looking at like sound effects stuff. I came across one of those. And that's interesting you brought that up. It's like when you see something or talk about something and Google all of a sudden has ads. I'm on to you, Therek. I'm on to you.
I'm lurking.
Yeah. Nimacry said, the big concern for me is, quote, can I use this music outside of direct gameplay? A secondary concern is, can I broadcast gameplay when in-game sound is muted, having different music play? This all comes down to MUL, and some of the competitors have draconian policies. And what he's sort of talking about, he must be a streamer. So it's interesting. And I don't know if you've ever seen a whole lot on this, Therek, or not, but there are game companies that like use music and then it's not directly licensed by them and somebody else claims the rights to it on like YouTube or something. So like you'll be playing and then all of a sudden your video gets demonetized or muted because they're saying, well, this isn't part of the game soundtrack.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. That would really, bum me out because I always play games with the music turned up. So this is a whole different aspect of that. So yeah, it would make a difference. Maybe that's why some people get used to turning it off because they're used to watching streams with the music turned off or down or something like that. Yeah,
this hit me when I did my Borderlands stuff. So really? I did, so day one when Borderlands 3 came out, I think I played it for like something like 6 to 8 hours on stream straight, if not longer. And they flagged my entire video because the very beginning when I started the game up had the intro song and it was licensed.
Oh, wow.
So the whole video got flagged, 6 hour video because of that.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer, man.
It was literally like 20 seconds.
Jeez.
Yeah. But getting back on topic here, talking about like soundtracks. So my thoughts are sort of all over the place on this. Weirdly, I own a ton of soundtracks from WoW because they all came in the collector's editions for the expansions. And the same with like Diablo 3. I have the big collector's box for it. And they're all still sealed. But for some reason, I really like having them. Is that kind of weird, I guess?
No.
Like collector's pieces, I guess. But a lot of times when I'm playing, I do turn off the music, if I'm honest. And I typically just listen to the sounds of the game. That said, there are definitely times where the music can make a zone feel alive. And I think someone actually said that when we were just reading the Twitter comments there. And one that like just really, really stands out to me is in the last WoW expansion, BFA, that's the last one I played. One of the zones was called Drustvar. It was very creepy. The music was so good in this area, legitimately so good that I think almost my entire play of BFA that I played, I kept the music on. Because that zone had such an impact on me. The storytelling in it, the moody atmosphere and the soundtrack just played into it so well. And as much as people rag on BFA, like I guess you could argue maybe not every zone was as good, but I thought that the music was done really well. So I don't know. It's odd. I like having soundtracks and I like listening to a well done soundtrack. But if it doesn't reel me in like right away, I kind of turn it off, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the Diablo 3 thing, I have it too. I have the collector's edition as well. And the soundtrack for that is pretty good. Soundtracks really vary in quality. There are some really crappy ones out there. Now, the Diablo 3 one's okay. It's not great, I wouldn't say, but it's just okay. But man, when they do it right, it just adds so much. So like VR, man, make a soundtrack, put it on like some sort of super high quality format. I'll buy it.
Well, there's probably a pretty good chance, being that the head of the game is a composer. So
good point.
Now, the last thing I'll say here is, like, outside of MMORPGs, the game that really stands out, like, instantly to me is Silent Hill. I love the Silent Hill soundtrack and all the games, and I'm pretty sure that a majority of the games are all done by the same person. And it's just music, like, that music just, as soon as I hear it, I just get chills. Like, I feel the environment because they did such a good job with that. And it's funny because there's distinct pieces of how they did the music in Silent Hill that actually shows up in some of the music I listen to. And oddly enough, me and you were talking about the Deftones before this, but there's a track on their Koi no Yoken album called Entombed. And it has this weird bass hit that, like, a bass guitar, like, strum that has, like, that real heavy distortion, almost sounding like the strings wobbling.
Ooh,
and
I like that.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of Silent Hill, like that. And then, like, kind of that drum hit that's like a psh, psh, like, it's a really Silent Hill-y sound. And there's a lot of music in the nu metal genre and screamo stuff that I like, that sometimes I can get, like, little traces of that, and I instantly think of Silent Hill. So again, if it's done well, I love soundtracks, but I think it really has to be, like, grade A for me to get into it.
Yeah. Especially when it gets that association quality, right? So now whenever you hear that sound, that distorted bass tone, you think of Silent Hill, right? So if you can incorporate that into your game, you're creating that hook, that mental hook. So
now, were you ever a video game or like a fighter game type of fan, like Marvel vs. Capcom?
I was a fighting game loser a lot. I got my ass kicked by my friends because I was terrible at them. But yeah.
Anybody listening who played Marvel vs. Capcom is going to know what I'm talking about, because if a song is so bad, sometimes it sticks in your mind. And I think it was maybe Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Maybe it was the first one, but they had this song that played on repeat in the menus, like want to take you for a ride. It was so bad. Oh my God. Anybody listening who played Marvel vs. Capcom, you just got that song in your head and you, like, had chills. So, but yeah, if it's really bad, I guess.
I still hear the old, like, TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade songs in my head. That's the kind of fighting music that I hear.
So good. All right, let's jump to the next topic here, which this is a really, really good topic. And we touched a little bit on this in, I believe, the first episode of Pantheon.Plus when we talked about, like, graphic quality and, like, what kind of graphics you're going for. And this is a little different, but it ties in. So the question was realism. How real to life do you like your MMORPGs to be? Is there a limit to how much a game should imitate real life elements? And if so, what are they in your opinion? So lots of varied opinions here. Let's start with Micah, who actually said, realism is fine until it becomes a detriment to the gameplay or needlessly punishing. Ammo is realistic, but needlessly punishing to range and cost and inventory and things like carrying five broadswords in a cloth satchel is okay, but you have to have coin weight because of realism. Yeah, I said that. So
nice.
Lexer said, I play games to escape life. So I guess you could say I prefer my MMOs to stretch what I find believable, but not so far to feel ridiculous. Basgrim jumped in and said, realism to a certain extent, just enough to make it believable, but not so much that you feel like you're unable to escape to a different world. Game worlds should be more fun than the real world, and any realism that isn't fun should have some sort of payoff in the end. Drac says, it all starts to feel like a survival game if you go too far towards realism. And I have some things to talk about that in a bit. Jim says, I was going to post, but I think Drac answered it best. So he kind of was on that. Yep. It feels like survival too far. However, I want realism in animations, weapons, and armor. No 25-foot swords, please. Untamed Engineer, and I love that he uses Dilbert with that name.
Good old Dilbert.
Yeah. Games should only mimic the highlights of everyday existence. The game is a place to escape the boring aspects. Please do not make my characters require sleeping, eating, paying taxes, etc. I love the paying tax. Yeah, I love that. And Mike Brown gave me a shout out. He says it's a game. It doesn't need to be a real life simulation. Basically what Pantheon.Plus said. Mike Brown, well done. I love it.
Nice.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Way to get on the podcast for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, your name's easy to say. You're giving us a shout out. You're in. A play by Satcher, who's been on here quite a bit with some of their comments. One thing that would be nice is the requirement for the character to rest, eat, and drink. How funny is that? This literally is what the person before just said they didn't want. I can suspend disbelief on a lot of things for a game, but a guy running or swimming the length of a continent in one shot, I don't know about that. And then he got a response from someone named Matt. And apparently he's the Reels Matt.
Reels Matt.
He's the Reels Matt.
Too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it should be an option and provide incentive. Most people don't want to play a real life simulator in game. We have the Sims for that. It's you know what's funny to me? Anytime like a house building or realism comes up, people refer to the Sims. When's the last time Sims has been relevant?
Dude, a long time. But
it's been Sims, a really long time. I like
the Sims. I had my Sims phase. I was into the Sims 3, I think is the last one I played.
But isn't it weird that it's still used? Like it literally, I can't remember the last time Sims was popular.
It made an impact on the culture.
I guess. River said real life is boring, so it doesn't have to be that similar. Obviously similar enough to be relatable and not some weird askew universe where everything is different and edgy like on some acid trip. Robert Fox says risk versus reward. That confuses me right off the bat, but you don't climb a mountain to be safe or go to a scary movie. Every day you step out of your own house, you take risks. Human race evolution is based on overcoming obstacles. Make the game as real as possible. Taking a risk, overcoming obstacles makes game fun. Kind of a really different take. That's why I included that one.
Deep. He's a deep thinker, I think.
This Robert Fox is thinking. Yes. Big Fat. He says, I'm just mostly annoyed that high fantasy settings leans so heavily on humanoid or human races. A few standouts like Crowfall with centaurs, but everything is always just bipedal and vaguely human. Why can't I just be a floating ball of psionic energy? Well, how would you change how you look in gear?
A game of wisps, just a game of different wisps.
There you go. Your color and the types of sparks that come off of you. Jack Nightmare says, I take a pass on the realism. If there's one thing to adapt from, I'd say a system where players can become the cogs that go into a functioning economy and society. Dylan Smith said, realism is fine up to the point where the mechanic becomes a hassle to manage. Food and drink are good if they provide benefits. Sleeping is fine if they provide benefits, not because you have to. That's true perfection. Things that add benefits but don't force your hand. And he actually got a reply from another person, Big Smoke, who said, can't agree more here. The kind of needs implementations are best. These kinds of needs implementations. Beneficial if you want to, but not something that's mandatory that'll ruin your experience if not managed correctly. I think that's a really good point. I like that. We'll get into that a little bit more. Andre Labont says, I like aspects of realism. Take food and drink, for example. I like having the idea of hunger or thirst in games, but I'd rather have it be a boost to, mana or health regen. If someone doesn't have food or drink, they shouldn't starve or suffer a penalty. They just don't get the bonus, which kind of ties into what they were just saying a lot.
Yeah, I kind of like that approach to it.
Yeah, Obi Jeff says mechanics need to not take away from fantasy. These mechanics should contribute to progression or stats, i.e. wrong gear in the cold has negative X effect if good. Enough food in the inventory is just item management and it's bad. Food to boost stats is good. Rathalis here says, doesn't need to have realism in my opinion, just logical to the rule set of the universe, but above all fun. You can make something more realistic or detailed, but it's not great when at the expense of being trivial, drag, time waster. Immersion, yes. Realism, no. Immersion, another one. And then, so that's it for them. So I'll give you, here's what I put. I'm more a fan of stylized with a realism base to work from. Trying to be too close to realism becomes quickly outdated, in my opinion, especially from a graphical standpoint. And I also dislike people using the quote of a realism in a fantasy game to discount ideas or systems that they want to see in game. Games are supposed to be an escape from reality, in my opinion. I mean, isn't that why we're playing? Isn't that why we started playing EverQuest in the first place? Not to mimic our life, to be something different. So the one thing, this is a topic I could probably do a whole show on, so I don't want to get crazy here. But there's a lot to talk about in this category. And I find it interesting that so many people went the food and drink mechanic, and then there was that weight mechanic tossed in a couple times to discuss realism. I have to say that I just do not want MMORPGs to take anything from this new survival genre. And it is a new genre when you consider, when it kind of came around. I think survival games are made for quick bursts, and I think MMORPGs are made for long haul. And I say that because in survival games, you die, you start over. Right? That's just how it works. You're going to run out of food, you're going to run out of camp, you die, you start a new character and you learn from it. I just don't think the two should be mixed. And this is one of those things that a ton of new, quote unquote, cutting edge MMORPGs they always try to promise like and end up vastly under delivering on like these survival features and build your camp and cook your food and grow your farm. I just feel like it's oversaturation into an MMORPG genre because the genre was fine before survival. Now, a lot of people don't think it's in a great place right now, but I don't think we need survival genre mechanics to bring back MMORPGs. If anything, we need to get further away from it. I just really don't like the survival genre at all in gaming, even by itself. That said, like this topic can go so many ways, like animations, for example. Like I like fantastical animations for melee characters, like spinning, jumping, particle effects for their swings. I like that stuff because as a caster, your animations are always super fantastical, like exploding, essence and stuff like that. So why not melee? Like, why can't melee be fantastical as well? And I think that this is something that WoW does really, really well. The animations in WoW, honestly, are what makes me think that that's what's helped WoW survive the test of time and why people can be okay with the graphics the way they are, because their animations are so smooth, so pretty, so clean. And I think that when you get too realistic with animations, you just start looking very rigid. So again, it's a very wide-ranged question. I mean, what are your thoughts and opinions on this whole thing?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of survival games either. I played Outward not that long ago, and I don't know if you've played that, but it's a single-player RPG with heavy on survival elements. And I think that the survival elements in that game completely turned me off. One of the things you have to do is when you're out adventuring, if you don't drop your pack, like your backpack with all your stuff in it, and you try to engage in combat, you're basically dead. Like you're never going to survive. You have to, every time you do it, every time you get into a fight, you have to drop your pack. I found it more annoying than the most annoying thing I've ever experienced. It was terrible. And I think that it's a good example though of what realism in a game should be and what it shouldn't be. Now, MMOs are, like you said, trying to add all these survival elements and these realism elements into it. They just it becomes a different game. It becomes a different type of challenge, right? So I'm thinking about Pantheon, and I'm thinking like, I like the climbing. The climbing is very realistic, and from what we've seen, right? So I think that's the good kind of realism. But if it's tedious and it's just a pain, and there's no purpose other than to try and challenge your sense of tolerance for how much you'll take, I don't see that. I don't see that being a good fit for the MMO genre at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. But if you have any hard time climbing, just grab this rope, Therek.
I think I'd rather plummet to my death than take my chances with you.
I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
Let me hold your coin purse when you're climbing. Well, that's it for this week's VR news and notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into social media and see what the discussion is all about.
Okay, so from the PantheonMMO.com forums, we are going to tackle a big issue this week. And the post is in the general discussion forums, and it's by General Reb. So it's called Group and Raid Loot Settings. So it's really, honestly, the discussion is more focused on group loot situations than raid situations. And I think this is a really good discussion because as we know, Pantheon's not going to have personal loot. And because of that, how you determine who can and can't loot an item becomes absolutely vital, right? I think we can all agree that one of the biggest motivations in an MMO comes from getting good loot. And it's really important to get this aspect right. So I'm going to read here what General Reb said. So he says, quote, "There are many posts on the forums about ninja looting, many talks about community policing. Based on the streams and the overall tone of the conversation in the streams regarding ninja looting, I wasn't really sure what to think, although I had mostly assumed there would be a modern loot system in place. I've read through the FAQ again, and I'm not seeing anything that addresses loot inside of a group or a raid, only kill stealing, which is easy to conflate with other loot issues. So we don't really know what system Pantheon's going to employ, but this is where it actually gets kind of interesting. In the most recent VIP roundtable, the one with Kilson, when he did it just on his own, here's a quote that he said. He said, "I also want to be able to hook up flawlessly into a group and have it designed well. So group play, rolling for loot, and stuff like that just works. And it's easy, and I don't want it to be a headache or have to think about it. I just want it to be interactive and well-designed, which it is, I can say from experience," end quote. So that
nice find there. Look at you.
Yeah, I know, right? I thought so too. When I saw this post, I was like, oh, that might be a bean of some sort. And I listened to that developers roundtable just the other day. I messaged you and I said, hey, And it was, not the most informative one they've ever done. It was interesting. I like hearing from Kilson, but this is a kind of an interesting nugget. So back to what General Reb said. He said this sounds a lot like a confirmation of group loot system that we haven't seen yet. And I know Kilson wasn't giving details. He was just sort of talking about his personal preference, but he did say, this is from his experience in the streams they've done when he's been a part of the team showing off some of the features, saying it's interactive and well designed is kind of interesting. We don't know what that means though. And then General Reb concludes by saying, I suppose there could be a debate over whether it's more fun to manually roll 100, but I feel like that's a draconian system at this point, and there should be a better system built into the group or rating in Pantheon. So interesting topic. Here's what the community had to say about that. So first up, Nekentros said, personally, I wish they would just move away from manual loot distribution in favor of an automated system. I think it could be done in a way where the rate of loot distribution player remained equivalent to how it's done manually. This would alleviate many of the issues we see when it comes to loot, and because the odds would remain the same, the excitement would still be there. Geeks said, I think in the previous older streams, they said there's no system and everyone can loot everything. I really hope they build in a system because I don't trust today's gamers to be social and have some kind of honor system and reputation system. My favorite would be a system like WoW with the need, greed, or pass. With the added rule, you can only roll need on an item if it's your armor class type. And the best rule being, if you press need, that item will then be bound to you and you aren't able to sell it. That's an interesting idea. A couple of them there.
I don't like that at all. The whole game's not built around, the whole game's built around like being able to sell items. So I don't think you should be penalized for hitting need. I do think that you should be blocked out of rolling need on something specifically if your class can't equip it. Then you can grade it. I think that's fine. But I really don't like that the item will be bound to you thing if you hit need. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, no, great minds think alike. I had the exact same thought. What I put in my notes here was I think the first rule definitely has some merit. But the second rule, I think it would stifle the in-game economy way too much and just take away a lot of the social gameplay that comes from that. Our buddy Nefel said, I think it's a reasonable expectation that when Pantheon launches, it will allow group leaders to select one of the several methods of loot distribution for their group. When players join the group, they'll be notified what method is in use. And if that method is changed while the group is active, they'll also be notified. The development team would have to be fools not to do something like this, especially when it should be relatively simple to set up. Disposalist had a long sort of post and a long opinion and lots of discussion in further posts. Basically, he says devs have stated multiple times with more assurance each time that Pantheon will have a loot system. I think the problem with giving a choice of automatic loot systems is that the average person doesn't appreciate the nuances and the implications of what's actually fair. So this is what he's talking about, what Nefel is saying there. The only fair loot system, according to Disposalist, is random over time. Mathematics and the universe can take care of the fairness perfectly. The longer you're involved in trying for something, the more chance you have of getting it. Luck isn't something players should organize or try to control. And the other thing he advocates for is something that I would oppose as well. He says the best way to do it is just plop the item into your inventory, probably with a notification. So like when your group is killing a mob and you kill it, and the item just goes right directly into your inventory is what he's saying. If players want to trade that item to another player or even give it up for free, that's up to them. But the game should do what's fairest and impartial because the players don't know or will have differing opinions and let the socializing take over after the game has handled the fairness. It's an interesting idea and like the natural fairness sort of aspect I get. I certainly don't want items just popping into my inventory. I really enjoy the act of actually looting a corpse. I think is sort of an essential element of the experience for me. The Goose said, I don't really understand why people don't like master looting and the need greed system. They really should be in the game. Otherwise, you're just going to unfairly punish players since they would effectively be hopeless in stopping ninja looting. Unicron takes a really hardline approach here, and I don't think he's necessarily wrong. He says it's like people either here forgot or they never understood in the first place that the reason Pantheon exists is to bring back the social aspect to MMOs. Loot discussion and distribution is as much a part of the social aspect of the game as any other. If you remove that, it runs counter to the principles that the game is being built upon. So, like I said, hardline approach. I'm going to talk about that a little more when I give my opinion on this. Arizon said in support of the above, so he supported the above Unicron's position. He says, I don't really remember there ever being any bickering over loot in EverQuest 1. You need something, and somebody else needed something. You rolled, and the winner got it. Ixar said one line. He says, "Want pass is the ultimate or the most fair baseline system for a group." Manuk said, "These days people are more outspoken about people rolling need on items not for their class. But to the point, if there was a need selection box, then a greed selection box to check once a loot window pops up, that would be cool. Need would roll first, and the winner would get the item auto-inventoried to them, and then greed rolls, and then would trigger that." So he's sort of saying an evolved system there. Like, but it does sound like there's a lot of sort of step-by-step decision-making to deal with.
That's actually exactly what WoW does. That's exactly.
Oh, is it really?
Yep. So if you can need, basically it's going to present you with a need, greed, or pass. If your class can't use it, you can't click need. So your only option would be greed or pass.
Okay.
And then it'll, if there are need rolls, it'll do the need rolls, and then a need person will win. And if there aren't any, it'll go to a greed person.
Do you find it like cumbersome to sort of do that every time, or is that sort of just become easy peasy?
Really easy. I'll talk about it more. I won't steal a bunch while you're in the middle talking about it. It's very, very easy.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Gaku said they want to see a system that registers an upgrade. So you registers an item as an upgrade, so you can click need over greed because honestly, it's an upgrade for that tune. I don't care if you're running that raid for an alt, you're playing that tune. Bottom line is that items should be for that character and nobody else. So he's putting some hard limitations on when you can roll need. Dorothy said, loot being automatically distributed without people rolling for it, other than the game distributing trash automatically? No, I don't like that idea. As others have said, it detracts from the realism and negatively impacts the ambiance. If loot is freely tradable...
I think they just figured out a way to say immersion without using the word. Let me repeat that. As others have said, it detracts from the realism, and this is the negatively impacts the ambience.
Write that down somewhere. We can just use that instead of immersion because it's a better way of saying it.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, if loot is freely tradable, I can see the argument for the same system. But on balance, over the years here, I have been persuaded that it's fairer for anyone to have an equal chance to roll for the loot. And the exception that Doherty notes is if loot is character bound, it should be a pure need, greed, pass roll with only characters able to use the item allowed to roll need. That button should be grayed out for all others. So Hokano says, I might be way off other opinions here. My feeling is the more a system is automated, the less connected we are with what is and isn't coming into our inventory. And I absolutely love that point. I really wholeheartedly agree with that. And Hokano expands on it, stating who's won what, who could use what, and hang on, poor old Therek hasn't had a decent win in hours. Give the poor guy a sword. That's pretty cool. I like that. So he says, when I'm in a group and we're making progress and getting chummy, I'd much rather through conversation be able to assist the loot to get to the best person. That might be because of their class, or maybe it's just because the poor dude has terrible gear. It's not the automation of random loot I don't like. It's the idea of people not even knowing what they're winning. And if we keep fighting and fighting, there's never a great chance to review what you have automatically won and see if there's a much better home for the item. Random Rob had a sort of really sarcastic but kind of funny one, so I'm going to read it anyway. He said there should be a system in place where a minigame pops up every time loot drops, and everyone in the group will have to partake in the minigame. Make it overcomplicated, like rock, paper, scissors with 6 different options. Make the best 2 out of 3 count. That would be epic. 30 seconds to kill the mob, 3 minutes to figure out who gets the rat tail that just dropped. Watemper says, well, regardless of how things are done, you either add character or erode character from the game. In terms of WoW, auto loot system, it erodes. The more choice and freedom you take away from the community, regardless good or bad, the less of community you'll have. So he's sort of anti-WoW system there.
Of course.
Yeah. And then Darch lastly said, I'd be on board with an automated system with a couple of options available to the players. Options that would be nice would be able to auto pass on all items, auto pass on items not usable by a specific class, and auto pass on certain rarities. So just adding in a few more like qualifiers there. So I'll give you my opinion, but I just want to keep it simple, connected. And some of the people, the way they suggested, I really like the way they did. I think Hokanu had probably the closest opinion to what I would say. A manageable system with minimal safeguards. Yes, like a need before greed system can be abused, but if that honestly seems like the most reasonable one, if we start to overcompensate for fear of bad actors, and this applies to a lot of different systems in Pantheon we've talked about, you end up taking all the enjoyment out of the system. we tend to underestimate the power of a group social dynamic. So just sort of imagine for a second a purely free-for-all looting system where it was just left to simple manual rolls, no controls whatsoever. Now, let's say someone in your group keeps rolling on items they clearly can't use, and just for whatever reasons, whether it's for an alt or to sell. How long before that person gets kicked out of the group, right? You may have missed a piece of gear or two because they're, being a jerk or whatever, but there's now a precedent set. And we have, a social norm, and there's an expectation in a group that is pretty powerful, in my opinion. I don't remember ever getting honestly like screwed over with a loot drop because someone's greed. I'm sure it happened. Maybe I just, wasn't paying attention or something, but I think we need to have faith in our fellow players. And, again, I'm maybe the optimist here, but I'm living in a dream, but I kind of hope for the best. But so Minus, what did you want to say about that?
Well, I have a strange idea here. I think that, one of the things I've been advocating a lot for ever since coming into this community is that there are some things in the modern MMO RPGs that are out there that are good and shouldn't be overlooked, and they're simple and they that's what it is, right? For a loot system, like a need before greed system where if you can use it, you can need, and if you can't, like we were just talking about, you can greed. It's simple. It's easy. Like you see the item, it's going to pop up. You'll have your option to need or greed or just greed or pass, So the different piece here though is in WoW, they become soulbind. So there's no value to them. So the one thing I may suggest, and this may sound crazy, is like somebody had said, like the group leader is going to be in charge of loot. So you could do a master looter where they hand out the loot after people roll, which is fine. And people would know when they come in, or you do the need versus greed. But here's the difference. In the past, need was an automatic win over greed. I think that because items have a value on the marketplace, greed should maybe have some chance to still win items. And I think the way you do this is really crazy. And I just thought of this as you were bringing this up. If the group leader was able to go into a window where it showed need and greed, and you could modify the weight by just simple numbers, it doesn't have to be crazy, but that like you could say, well, a need is 2 times more likely, or like maybe it takes some of the low numbers away so that there's a better chance that need's going to win. But you could set like a little bit of a weight where greed might at times win an item, that way they could take it and sell it, or they could win it and then barter to give it to somebody. And I think that is good for the economy. And I think that, it also stops people who can need on something from doing it, even if they don't. Right. Like, so like if I'm a warrior and I have a great chess piece already and another one drops and I know it's worth a lot of money, I could still roll need, right? Because I'm a warrior and I could do it, but I don't really need it. So I think having some kind of manual weighting system that the group leader can change would be really neat. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to be superly overly complicated. You could just have like an up or down slider or something. But that would be really cool. And it still gives people who are there for money, like me, like I'm never going to get any money if I can't sell loot. Like I don't craft, right? So it can be an interesting way of doing it. I mean, I don't know how it would work. I don't know what the complications would be or if that would be hard. But I do think it would be cool that you could still need or greed, but when you greed, you still have a chance of making some money in being greedy, right? So
yeah, I like that idea. I don't think it's that crazy actually. I think it puts a lot of the group leader takes on a lot of responsibility in a system like that. If they were to, if that was to be how it worked, but that's not such a bad thing either because being a group leader is a tough job. If you're the one doing the invites or you're sort of directing people in a group, I mean, you take on a little extra responsibility and you take on a little bit extra control over the loot distribution beyond just setting this system that, so
it could even create a social event there where when someone comes in, you're deciding as a group what that should look like.
Yeah. So, because somebody in the comments said, I want to have discussions. I want to talk about loot. That I do too, right? I think talking about loot's super cool and sort of figuring things out. So yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, and I'm glad that somebody caught that little piece from Kilson's developer roundtable there. So, okay, so no new introductions this week. So instead, what I'm going to do is actually give it a couple people who posted that they're looking for a guild, just a little bit of a signal boost to help them out. The first one was a fellow by the name of Chloris, and they posted on the forums that they're looking for a guild. They're out of the United States. They're in the Eastern time zone, 30 years old. It says personal traits, helpful, self-proclaimed comedian, rating dungeon runs, progression, prefer learning the game rather than looking up guides and such. Says that they're a team player and chatting while grinding, but might be quiet at first until I get to know everyone, and then I have the gift for gab. So he's looking for a guild that tends to play later at night around 11 p.m. Eastern or later. Usually play heavy melee character but because he wants to look awesome. And have to learn to be a good tank. So, and then another fellow looking for a guild is Sekong. He says, right now I'm probably going summoner or shaman to start the game, waiting to make my decision until the summoner release video. I've pledged up to being able to play in alpha beta. They're in the Mountain Standard Time Zone.
Mountain Standard Time.
Yeah.
That's the one that confuses me. I'm going to be honest. I know it's stupid because it's 1 extra hour, but like, who lives in that zone? I go, what? Never mind. Good. My only advice to you, Skong, is one, don't tell people you're in the Mountain Time. Pick one. Like pick Central or pick one. And then the other piece, if you want to get into a guild, don't tell them you're going to play a summoner. Just say you're going to be a shaman and then do like a switch and then you're already in. So nobody wants summoners. Listen, Sacred's going to be a summoner. He had to do that. He had to make a whole guild so that he could be welcomed in. So stick to shaman. Anyway, sorry.
I want to go back to your Mountain Time aversion for a second here. That is a really strange hate on you have for Mountain Standard Time people.
Wait, how many people do you know that live in Mountain Standard Time?
Dude, I grew up in Mountain Standard Time.
Oh, I
lived in Western Alberta for the big part of my life, and I'm from Mountain, and I still got family out there. So I'm sorry, we have a serious disagreement about Mountain Standard Time.
This is gonna hurt our relationship. I feel like elves was one thing, but supporting Mountain Standard Time is rough.
We have a new thorn in our side, do we?
That should be your character name. Therek Mountain Standard Time. All right, good.
That's not bad. I can do that. That's not too bad. I'll take it. Anyway, so going back to Sekong, he said, I tend to enjoy all aspects of the game. I like to be a well-rounded character, so my opening focus for the game will be exploration and lore while leveling and learning. Character growth via various systems that are implemented. I've always been an endgame raider, and I'll probably want to dive into that content as well, and dungeon dive as much as allowed. So if you are in a guild or you're running a guild and you want to get some new people in your guild, go and give them a shout out. And from there, we're going to go over to Reddit, as we do everyone's favorite Wild West of the internet commentary on the Pantheon MMO Sub-Reddit. This is related to actually what we talked about earlier in the show with music. It was just somebody, so Nathaw says, he pointed out the SoundCloud page as well. And he asked people what their favorite track from the Terminus, from the Pantheon SoundCloud page is. He just reminded everybody too that Chris Joppa Perkins, the creative director and lead game designer, was originally brought on to create sound and music. And these pieces that are on the page, I believe, are his creations. And we, a lot of us, we've heard that Terminus theme song a lot of times during the streams. So if you've watched them, you probably recognize it. But there's quite a few over there that they don't play during the streams, and I would strongly suggest everybody go over there and check them out. So he asked which piece is the favorite of everybody's, and I'll read a few of the responses. Jack Whisper said, I've listened to all the songs repeatedly, and one really jumped out, specifically a specific section of it. The Terminus song from the 6-second mark to the 36-second mark is just so much good. He said, goosebumps, thoughts of adventure, a feeling of wonder and awe at exploring the world really brought me back to the town music in EverQuest that left me feeling small in a huge land. That swell in my chest when I think of adventuring in the universe, not just a game, but a world. Those 30 seconds in the middle of Terminus just do that. The rest of the songs are great, but that spoke to me. So it's, again, incredibly awesome to hear how a simple tune can make someone feel and sort of inspire them like that. Grits and Gravy 77 said Kingdom of Sand is his favorite. Serene said Mystery Awakens. Ever since I first heard it at the character creation in one of the streamer streams, great use of it. Scorie said their favorite track is Kaga Sands and The Great King is Banished. Donler said Kingdoms of Sand as well was their favorite one. And for me, I've listened to all these several times. I was surprised that you didn't know about these, Minus. That's pretty cool that you discovered it in the course of sort of doing the notes for this week. But Kaga Sands is my favorite as well. I've listened to that a lot, and it has this super sense of foreboding, right? It's got this really stark strings part, just like call out strings, and then this heavy percussion in the background. And there's these subtle chanting voices in the background, and they always make me think of giants guarding an ancient tomb. If you think back to EverQuest, you remember the giants that stood outside Vox's lair, right?
Yep.
that's what it makes me think of. And it's got that sort of deep rumble to it. I love it. Anyway, as the name implies, I can definitely see it being used for like a barren, dangerous sort of desert. And the discussion kind of actually morphed a little bit just for a couple more responses. I'm talking about how VR is approaching music. And going back, a lot of things, I'm not going to read them, but a lot of things were echoes of what we said earlier with regard to how important the personality of a music is, right? Talking about some of the MMO soundtracks that are current MMO soundtracks, and how they have this, or seem to have this need for an orchestral. Everybody needs this big orchestral sound. And we need to get away from that, right? Like, or at least a little bit. It's not bad. I don't mind some of it. I think of Jeremy Soule all the time, right? Like, legendary sort of composer, did the Skyrim music, did music going all the way back to like the Icewind Dale games. Really sort of legendary, but all his music sort of ends up sounding very, very similar. And I think that you can really, with a small team like VR, you can get some really personalized music, some really interesting and unique kind of music. But what do you think, Minus? Out of all those tracks that you listened to, which one was your favorite?
I mean, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but that Fading Memory, it's funny because it's only a 45-second track compared to some of these being like a more of a full production. And it was the one that was shown on the co-stream when he like looked through the wall and saw the statue.
So good. That was so good.
Yeah, and it's subtle, but it you know, when you can listen to a 45-second sound clip and feel different emotions, I love it. I really do. And like I said, I took it and turned it into like a 3-minute thing and did a little crossfade stuff so that it could loop itself better. And I enjoy it. It's kind of gives me chills. It puts me in it's weird. Like when I made that, I was working on the Pantheon.Plus episode 40 stream, like designing it, and it was playing in the background on the stream because I had it as the background music, and it was probably on loop for like an hour and a half while I was fixing stuff. And it just put me in this like mood. It focused me. It's weird, but that's definitely my favorite right now.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. I like that one too. When Ko looked through that little hole in the wall, man, I remember that too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then just quickly on Facebook, we'll finish up. I just want to give a quick shout out for Chase Masters, who the admin over there. He wanted to know if there were any active members of the Voices of Terminus Guild in the Pantheon Facebook group. So if you are a member of the VOT Guild, let Chase know and give him a holler. So
hey, before you end this, I'll give you a little secret without saying anything. So Chase lives a half hour from me, we found out, if even, probably 20 minutes. So we're going to be going to get a drink pretty soon here together, maybe even like next week after. But we're going to have some exciting things to maybe talk about coming up from Pantheon.Plus. I don't want to spoil anything just yet, but with their Facebook group and Pantheon.Plus, we'll be talking about something soon, and we're pretty excited about it. So we'll leave it at that.
Awesome. That's awesome. Ooh, exciting. I'm excited to hear what this is about. So yeah, good stuff, man. But that's it for this week's community discussions.
Let's talk content creator updates and new additions to Pantheon.Plus. All right, so not a ton to talk about here with Pantheon.Plus, so I'm just going to get through it pretty quick. So this week, Basgrim put out part 2 of his video series examining the world of Terminus. These videos are really well put together, and he tries to tie pieces of the world we've seen so far together to kind of get an idea of scale of Pantheon, what things we might have missed during different developer teases. And aside from just world scale, he dives into like information around fast travel, abilities, or items that may tie into exploration or travel in Terminus, and just more things like that. What's really funny, and Therek, maybe I'm crazy, but when I was watching it, he showed that the first one was put out like a year ago. It does not feel like it. I could have swore that was like a couple months ago. That feels so weird that was a year ago that other video was put out.
I know. Crazy.
Time's flying. Everyone says it's taken so long for Pantheon to come out, and I feel like a year just disappeared right there. So something a little different here. We're actually in a second here, Therek, I'm going to play a clip for the show and then just kind of talk about it in a second here. But let's start by saying that Pantheon.Plus episode 40 was this week. We were joined by 9 other content creators, and we talked through a few different Pantheon topics. You know, we talked about what race classes we were excited to play and why. We dove into what we loved about the Pantheon community, but what we'd change as well. Dove into features like what we're most excited about and what we want to see, next on like the next developer stream. And finally, we talked about, some of our concerns for Pantheon moving forward. Now, for those of you that haven't watched it is a much longer episode of Pantheon.Plus U. It's coming in at about 2 hours and 20 minutes. So it's about an hour, a little less than an hour longer than a normal episode. So know that going in, maybe consume it in pieces. But I thought it had a really good flow to it. As everyone kind of had their chance to talk, give feedback, represent their opinions, there was some good discussion that came up around it. We also, though, however, were joined by Joppa as like a special surprise to the content creator community, where he kind of thanked everybody for the support. And I'd actually like to play that clip here where Joppa stops in, says his piece. And I threw a little stat out there that I feel like is kind of important for the collective of the content creator community who was on there. So here it is. I'm going to do something a little different here, but here is the small clip. It's a couple minutes long of Joppa stopping into Pantheon.Plus U episode 40. Let's go ahead and let the surprise guest talk a little bit here.
I hear somebody say PvP.
Oh, wow.
Joppa.
Hey, Joppa.
Hey, Joppa.
So I am going to keep this short and sweet. I asked Minus if I could drop in because this is just a great opportunity to say thank you to so many of our content creators at once. And I know there's a lot of content creators that aren't here and present tonight, but just been watching the show and just felt it really strongly that a thank you is warranted. And it's not only on behalf of Visionary Realms, but it's really a thank you from the entire community. This is from all of us who enjoy really just everything that you guys create and put together. It's humbling. Truly it is. The time and the passion that you put into what you do. It's amazing. And we simply wouldn't be where we're at today without the support of our content creators. So just wanted to come in here right as you guys transition out. It's really hard not to want to jump in and respond to a lot of these things, but it's so cool just listening and hearing. And so that's all. Thank you guys so much, and Joppa out. See you guys soon.
Thanks, Joppa.
Thanks, Joppa.
Thanks.
So it was awesome. I saw that he had pinged me and he was trying to come in, and I wasn't allowed to share the secret here, but he just wanted to come in and say thanks. So Joppa, thank you. It does mean a lot to us. Really cool for you to jump in, say hi to everybody. It's awesome.
Pretty cool, man. That was awesome.
So before, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I put out a tweet, and then we're going to go to the green room here earlier today. And I just think that this is really interesting. The collective group here, we don't all just make Pantheon content, but I would say that a large majority of the content in this crowd is Pantheon based for their YouTube channels and stuff like that. So I put out this little stat. I went through, and there's a site called Social Blade where you can kind of look at people's views and stuff like that. And I went through everybody who's here, all the different content creators. And this is a stat that it made me feel really good. Because, individually, I mean, some of you guys are huge, right? Like Nathan, you just hit 7,000. Basgrim, your numbers are through the roof. Some of us are a lot bigger than others, right?
But no, they're not. Just in the grand scheme of things, I just need to say no.
Well, but what I'm saying is like, while we all have our different followers, we all have our different content. A lot of us have spent a lot of time talking about Pantheon. It seems cool to say this after Joppa is in here. So the number, like I went through, and Twitch and YouTube, and that's it. Not Twitter. We can't get any analytics for that, like the different things we've done there. But for Twitch and YouTube, this group sitting here right now has generated 2,706,494 views on their content. And I would say that it's probably safe to say, though, that like of that, you're probably looking somewhere around with this group, 70% of that being Pantheon. Because there's people in here that are only Pantheon, and there's people in here that are half Pantheon, but a lot of it is Pantheon. So like, it's not me sitting here tapping us on the back. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say. It's more trying to say that if we didn't come together as a community and do things like this, like Basgrim, you talked about, like, this isn't common. Nathan, you've talked about that a lot. Community people like us in different communities are fighting each other, right? They're rivals. They want to win. And this community, like, what's cool is like for Pantheon, all of us got into this because we wanted to make content for a game that we wanted to see succeed. And between the group of us, we almost have 3 million views. Like, we almost had 3 million pieces of content about this game watched. And, it kind of puts it into a pretty cool perspective. So Therek, I think it goes without saying that, Joppa's message also extends out to the community when he kind of talks about this. Like, so the people who talk about Pantheon, the people who pledge, those that are clicking on our videos, right? Like, it was an awesome message for us as content creators because we really want to know we're having a positive impact. But I think all pieces of the community are what help bring Pantheon to life. So I think everyone, like if you've watched any content creators videos, if you're listening to this, if you're chatting about different topics that come out, you know, all of that helps motivate them to keep going, helps Pantheon come to life, helps spread the word. I mean, if nobody watched our videos, we wouldn't be worth a damn. So, you know, what are your thoughts on how the episode went, Joppa's appearance, and kind of the collective that this group of content creators has achieved? I mean, almost 3 million combined views. And I'd say probably 70% of them, like of that group, were probably Pantheon. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, it was a great show. I love it when everybody comes together, and I love that there's this tradition in the community of, you know, once every 6 months on rotating on different people's channels. So Basgrim does it, you do it, you know, VOT at it. Like, I love that they do these community content creators, bring them together for this roundtable. It really is such a nice cooperative sort of feeling, and to see everybody get together and to see people that we don't often see, or maybe who aren't making content, you know, like get to see, you know, people like Militus and Haya and all these people that aren't, you know, regular sort of on the, you know, regular faces that we see all too much anymore. To get them on and have them be able to talk was so nice. And that, you know, and then for Joppa to come on and volunteer just to sort of come in and say thank you. It energizes us, me personally, if I'm making something, you know, Pantheon related. I know you're probably motivated as well. And I think it's this mutual motivation, because their team is motivated by seeing us do these things, right? And doing community events in support of their game or inspired by the game that they're making. So I think we just feed on each other. And it's so great to hear the sort of the head honcho of the team say nice things like that. And I was very humbled by it as, you know, part of the community as well. So wow, just all the warm fuzzies, right?
Yeah, it was really cool too, because I've watched the clip a few times, and to watch the faces of the different content creators, because nobody except me knew that he was going to try to come on. And there was just a general happiness and excitement to hear him come on. And you just saw that pride in everybody, like trying to do this, not for themselves, but for the community. And there was just this very, very warm feeling, like you said, warm fuzzies. And you can see it in the faces of the content creators. And we're all so different, right? Like so different. But just to see kind of that joy wash over the stream is really cool. So definitely check that out if you guys haven't seen it. We also put a highlight clip of that on Twitter, and we put it on, it's on Twitch. So you can look at just that quick clip that we played there if you'd like. So, also keep in mind, you can check that out on Pantheon.Plus. Of course, if you ever miss any episodes of what you're listening to now in the rewind, you can always check that on the website or iTunes or Spotify. So what's being worked on? Well, you guessed it, article submission. But the exciting news is we're able to now save articles in our testing environment due to some back-end work. And we've begun working on the approval and editing system. So to add to that, we're actually starting to design how they're going to show up on the site. And we had some pretty fun conversation with that, like where the articles are going to be housed. They're going to be on their own page. So they're going to tie into what you already see on the page. But we have these really good ideas on how people are going to be able to find articles and comment, and people who write articles will get recognition. So there's some fun stuff coming. And the other news from us is, if you didn't know, Valor is, or Valere, I still messed that up. He actually told me, by the way, that he's like, if you just want to say Valor, it's fine.
He's pretty easy going.
He's super easy going, yeah. But they're doing another pre-alpha test on the 31st. They do it once a month. You know, the last test was just kind of a small little test. This one's going to be testing the game's housing system. I'm interested to see what this is like. I don't know how much content's going to be there, but if there's enough, you know, we'll stream a little bit of it to show you guys some stuff, or put out a content video kind of recapping maybe both of the last two pre-alphas. But I don't know. I've never been huge into housing, but just because I've spent time with Valere and seeing it grow, I guess I'm excited for it. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah. I want to try it too. I built a house in Vanguard. I was pretty happy with my house in Vanguard. So I'd like to get in there and try it out and see what kind of, you know, system they're employing.
I'm gonna have to cheat and watch you build a house, because mine's gonna look horrible. But
you can gather the materials for me.
Yeah, I'm great at that. Can I kill something to get it? I can hang dead animals on your wall for you. And that's it from Pantheon.Plus. And now it's time for bold Pantheon takes.
All right, bold take time it is. So I'm glad we started doing this segment like 14 episodes into the show's life, because I'm not sure I would have had the bravery needed to put some of these ideas out there until now. But last week during the YouTube premiere, people were really into this, and there was a lot of chatting going on. And I think we might hit on something here. But Linus, that reminds me, actually, for your bold take last week, I gave out your email address in chat for all the hate mail from the EQ Hardline veterans that you were talking about. I hope that's okay, and I hope you've managed to dig yourself out of that mountain of emails by now.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine, because when people email me, they have to answer like a really simple WoW trivia question, and none of them could get it right, so nothing came through. So we should be pretty fine. So
yeah, nice. I like your security filter. It's a good idea. Okay, so my bold take this week, I don't think it's going to rankle too many people, maybe some people who haven't fully embraced the whole Pantheon patient attitude yet, but here's my bold take. I think that Pantheon's long, very public development cycle is actually its secret weapon to being a successful MMO. And not just because of the like polish or the things that are needed for different reasons. I'll give it in a second here. But if it was just dropped, like if it was being developed behind closed doors, it would fail. So here's what I mean by that. The process that they're using is actually the only way a real community can develop. And having a real community at launch is going to be crucial for Pantheon's success. So just think about that for a second. Like, how many MMOs have you watched come and go because by the time that they were ready to go and they went live, and these weren't like kickstarted or like publicly funded sort of things, nobody knew about them. Or maybe you had some like trailers, or you had some, little hype advertising, but you didn't have like a community. Nobody had interacted with anybody before. There was basically, the game was dumped into the world, and they were told, hey, here's a game, build a community around it, right? Like, game developers are really good at making games. They suck at building community. Yeah. Honestly, like, that's our job, not theirs, right? And when a game is developed behind closed doors, there's nothing for a community to really gravitate towards. There's nothing that binds people together. Like, consider the people that we know and we've spoken to in the Pantheon community. Like, how has this occurred? So if your MMO isn't really a social game to begin with, and most AAA MMOs out there at the moment aren't, you can get away with it. Pantheon really can't get away with that. It's going to need an established community to show off what it means to bring back a social MMO and entice other people to get on board. And I would say that this is what we've seen happen over the years. Now, is there a limit to this? Yes. Communities can fade when launch day comes. But even if that happens, it adds that extra layer of ease for an MMO that's going to ask you to bring friends, right? We heard this from VR back in the early stages. So if you've made some acquaintances beforehand, it's going to be a better experience. And that's going to make the game a success because people are going to see that. So I know it's tough to wait, I think, but I think this is a wise strategy on VR's part to do it this way. Like, Pantheon patience is going to pay off, and I think it's necessary for Pantheon to be a success. So that's my bold take.
Well done, man. Your bold takes are so thoughtful. Mine are just like antagonizing.
Good cop, bad cop.
I guess. I don't know. There's minus. I guess that's why everyone voted for me to die first in the raid.
That's true.
Meanwhile, I'm a raid leader. We'll get into that another day. I would definitely send someone else in to die before I did. I mean, let's be serious. So I wanted to put something good together for this segment. I feel like this segment oddly gives me a lot of like stress and pressure, and I love it. But it's like, oh, I want something good. Like, what's bold? But I feel like if I don't make enough people say like WTF, then I'm not doing a good job. So I was thinking about a bunch of different stuff, but here's what I settled on for this week. I think that the gnome race will be the most underplayed race in the game. Now, before I get into like everything, let me just say this. I absolutely love the race. I love the lore and everything VR did to make something new and fresh. It's not that I don't think it's well designed. I think that this is because one, they can't be tanks or healers. And that's pretty crazy. Like, they have no tanks and no healers in their race, right? So that's going to take a lot away from them. And it kind of puts them at a disadvantage over most races at that point. The other side of it is that although kind of it would seem like they would be great summoners or great wizards, other than trying to like min-max some passive or active abilities, which honestly, let's be real, it's not going to have that much of an impact on like being a AAA, right? I mean, I think that you'll still see other races being picked top for those classes. And so why? Like, the gnome, while extraordinarily unique, they lack individuality, I think, in what I've seen. Now, they could totally change our minds here, right? But like the ability to customize their appearance, to have like their own look, or at least like an envisioned look, I think it's going to cause the race to suffer in being selected. I think that perhaps when like we see the new models, maybe again, our minds will be changed, but I just can't imagine the customization of a gnome will match that of like a human or a dwarf or any of the other ones, where like players have like a set look in their head of like what they want to be like, right? Like we don't even know, like gnomes aren't even gonna have hair, like from what we've seen. So like the saving grace here could be enchanters, because as the class seems to play pretty well towards like using illusions. So people could like use illusions to circumvent being like always being a gnome, to add some flavor. I don't know. I love the gnome race. I love what they've done. I've commended VR greatly in redesigning such a well-known race so boldly as they have the gnome, but I do fear it will be the least picked. Therek, do you think I'm out of my mind, or does this actually make any sense?
No, I think you've definitely lost your mind. I think you make some good points. They have some things working against them. I can see what you're saying. Definitely being able to customize your look is a huge thing. And the limitation on the classes is a huge thing. But you know what my thinking is that because they're so unique, people want to play them for that very reason, because we haven't seen a race like this in other games, at least not one that's called, with a traditional name like a gnome, but looking so differently. I think that's got a lot of pull for a lot of people, but who knows? You could be right. You're thinking very practically, so you never know.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to bookmark this, then go back and be like,
yes,
I wish it was ogres, but it's not going to be.
I'll call you back. I'll be like, remember episode 15 when you said there were no gnomes and the whole Pantheon is all gnomes
like
running around everywhere?
Yeah, there's like no humans for some reason, which will never happen.
Gnome apocalypse.
All right, and that's it for Bold Takes. So that wraps up the show, actually. So Therek, another great show. I appreciate everything, man. Thank you for always being here, always coming up with great ideas for this show. And I do like Bold Takes. That was a great teamwork thing to come up with there.
Dude, it's always a good time. I love it. Always a good time.
And thank you for moderating the episode 40 there. It was huge. The chat was on fire. I couldn't keep up with it. There was too much to manage. So thank you for that. As always, just an awesome team, man. I don't know what I'd do without you. A lot of bro love.
I hear you, man. I hear you, bro.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody for hanging out, checking out our podcast here. And as always, we're looking for your feedback. So let us know what you thought.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon.Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon.Plus. Also, be sure to follow Therek at Pantheon Therek on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.Pantheon.Plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.